If that dog doesn't stop staring at that photo, I'm gonna start thinking it's haunted. That's what I said out loud on day 5 of working the early morning shift at Greenwood County Shelter. The photo in question? A faded Polaroid of a young boy and an older golden retriever taped to the inside wall of kennel number 12, the same kennel that now held Hank, our newest rescue. A mutt with soft brown fur, soles, and a tail that never wagged. He wasn't aggressive, never barked, didn't growl, didn't flinch. But every morning like clockwork, he'd sit down in front of that picture and stare. For hours. I'm Rick, by the way. 43 years old, divorced, and semi-retired after a back injury ended my career in construction. Now I spend my days scrubbing kennels, tossing tennis balls, and trying to find good homes for animals most folks overlooked. I've been at this shelter for almost 2 years, and I've seen all kinds of strange behaviors in dogs. Trauma responses, habits from former homes, even some that seemed superstitious. But nothing like Hank. He came in just over a week ago, picked up by animal control from an empty field behind the old textile mill off Route 7. No collar, no chip, and no one reported him missing. At first, we thought he was just another abandoned pup, the kind that gets dumped when they get too old or too expensive. But then the staring started, and kept going. When the shelter manager, Debbie, found out I was watching him every morning, she gave me the raised eyebrow look. "Rick, I don't pay you to ghost hunt," she said. "Maybe he just likes the colors, or it reminds him of something. Or someone," I muttered. But I dropped it, for the time being. It wasn't just the staring, though. Something about Hank got under my skin. The way he moved, like he was always trying to stay invisible. The way he perked up every time a kid came through the shelter on a tour or adoption visit. Not every kid, just the ones with a certain look. Brown hair, usually. Small, soft-spoken. And every time his ears would twitch, and he'd inch toward the front of the kennel, eyes locked in a desperate hope I couldn't explain. On the 6th day, I brought my thermos of coffee and a chair and sat with him just outside the kennel. "All right, Hank," I said, taking a sip. "You've officially out-weirded every dog I've ever met. What's the deal with that picture?" He didn't look at me. His gaze stayed fixed on the boy in the photo. The boy looked maybe 10 or 11. Freckles, skinny, his arm slung around the neck of a golden retriever that looked a lot like Hank, just a few years and a few pounds ago. I leaned in closer, trying to see if there was any writing on the photo. Nothing. Just grass, a little white fence, and a big oak tree in the background. Could have been anywhere in the country. That afternoon, I asked Debbie about the photo. "Any idea who left that in Kennel 12? She frowned. "That's been there since I started here. At least 5 years. We used to keep it up to brighten the place up a little. You know, a nice reminder of happy endings." "So you're telling me it's a coincidence that Hank ended up in the one kennel with a photo he can't stop staring at?" "I'm telling you it's a shelter. Coincidences happen. Don't get all conspiracy theory on me." I didn't argue. But that night, I printed out a copy of the photo and taped it to my fridge at home. Just something about it stuck with me. The next morning, I brought a laminated copy and showed it around town. I hit the diner, the post office, the general store, places where people remembered things. Nothing. Not one person recognized the boy, the dog, or the background. By the 8th day, Hank finally started to respond to me. A little. When I walked up to the kennel, he didn't just glance my way. He stood up and wagged his tail, just once, like a testing motion. "You're warming up to me," I said. "Or maybe you're just tired of pretending you're a statue." I took him out to the play yard, and he walked calmly at my side, never pulling on the leash. He didn't chase the tennis ball, but he did sniff around the grass and nuzzled my hand when I crouched beside him. "You've got a story, buddy," I whispered. "We just have to figure out what it is." That night I called my cousin Jake. He worked as a local reporter and had a hobbyist's love for mystery. When I told him about the photo and the dog's obsession, he didn't laugh. "Send me the photo," he said. "I'll run it through an image reverse search. See if it pops up anywhere." I emailed it immediately. Jake called me back the next morning, his voice tight. "Rick, I didn't find the exact photo, but I found a match on the setting. That oak tree? It's in Franklin Park, over in Templeton. That white fence was a memorial structure, torn down 5 years ago after the storm." "Templeton? That's 2 counties over." "Yep. And get this. There was a news story from 7 years back. A boy named Tommy Bledsoe. Went missing for 3 days. His golden retriever was with him the whole time in the woods. The dog helped keep him warm. Eventually, the dog led rescuers right to the kid. They both made it out okay. Huge deal back then." My throat tightened. "Do you have a picture of the dog?" "Not a clear one, but from what I can tell, looks a lot like your boy Hank. But this was 7 years ago. Hank's maybe 10 now. Could fit." Jake paused. "Thing is, the dog was named Buddy. According to the articles, Buddy passed away 2 years after the rescue. Old age. Then Hank can't be him. Maybe not, but the resemblance is spooky. And the boy? Tommy? He'd be about 17 now. Might still live around there." I sat in silence, my heart beating faster. Could it be that Hank belonged to someone who knew Tommy? A neighbor? A family member? "Send me everything you've got," I said. The next day, I requested time off and drove to Templeton. First stop, the public library. The local archive had a scrapbook of old newspaper clippings, and sure enough, there was Tommy's story. Smiling boy, big front teeth, holding onto his retriever with tears in his eyes. The article praised the dog as a hero. The photo wasn't the same as the one in our shelter, but it had that same oak tree, same white fence. I asked the librarian if the Bledsoe family still lived in town. She nodded. "They run the hardware store on Main." I thanked her and made my way there. The store was quiet, smelled of cedar and paint. A middle-aged man stood behind the counter. He looked up and offered a polite smile. "Help you find something?" "Actually, I'm looking for someone," I said. "Tommy Bledsoe." The man's smile faded a little. "That's my son. You with the school?" "No, sir. I work at an animal shelter in Greenwood County. I think I may have found a dog that used to be around here. I was hoping your son might take a look." He studied me. Then he reached behind him and called, "Tommy, come up front." A tall, lean teenager emerged from the back. Brown hair, freckles, the same eyes from the photo. "Yeah, Dad?" The man pointed to me. "This gentleman says he might have something for you to see." I handed Tommy the laminated copy of the photo. His hands trembled as he took it. "Where did you get this?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. "In the kennel with a dog named Hank. He's been staring at it for days." Tommy stared at the photo, then back at me. "That's me," he said. "That was Buddy, my dog. We used to play in that park every Saturday. We took that photo the day after he saved me." His father looked over his shoulder. "I remember that picture. We lost the original years ago. But how did it end up in your shelter?" "That's what I'm trying to find out," I said. "But more than that, Hank needs to see you. I think he's trying to tell us something." Tommy's eyes welled up. "Can we go now?" I nodded. "Follow me." As we drove back to Greenwood, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were on the edge of something big. Something we weren't supposed to understand but were meant to witness. And when Tommy finally stepped into the shelter and approached kennel No. 12, Hank did something I'd never seen him do before. He howled. The sound Hank made didn't match his body. It was wild and aching, something deep and echoing like it had come up from his ribs after years of being held in. The second Tommy stepped into the shelter lobby, Hank's howl filled the space like a sudden storm. Every head turned, volunteers froze, dogs barked back in confusion or excitement. But Hank didn't take his eyes off Tommy. I'd seen a lot in my time with animals, but I'd never seen a reaction like that. Hank wasn't just happy or excited. He was mourning, releasing, remembering. Tommy stood still, like he didn't know whether to cry or run forward. He took a shaky step toward the kennel, and Hank stopped howling, but pressed his body against the gate, tail wagging slowly, as if afraid any sudden move would make the boy vanish. "That's him," Tommy said, barely audible. "That's Buddy. Or, he looks just like him." I stepped closer. "He's been fixated on that picture of you two for days. Hasn't taken his eyes off it." Tommy crouched down, his hand resting on the wire fencing of the kennel. Hank pressed his nose to it, not barking or jumping, just breathing Tommy in. "He died, though," Tommy said, turning to his father, who stood quietly behind him. "Remember? We buried him under the big oak in our yard." His dad nodded. "I remember, son. You cried for days. We all did." "So this can't be him," Tommy whispered. "But it feels like it is." Debbie walked in from the office, saw the scene unfolding, and wisely said nothing. She just stood beside me, her arms folded, watching. I leaned toward her. "Any chance records from that time ever got messed up? Like if someone thought Buddy passed, but it wasn't him?" She shook her head slowly. "You think someone buried the wrong dog?" "Stranger things have happened." "No chip, though," she reminded me. "And no tattoo. If this really was Buddy, he'd have been tagged somewhere." "Maybe. Or maybe he wasn't." Tommy stood up. "Can I walk him?" Debbie nodded before I could answer. "Let Rick show you how. He knows Hank better than anyone." I handed Tommy the leash and guided him through the safety gate. Hank didn't hesitate. Not for a second. As soon as the kennel door opened, he walked straight to Tommy's side like it was the most natural thing in the world. No pulling, no sniffing around. He just looked up, tail giving a low, steady wag, and waited. They walked the play yard perimeter twice before Tommy sat down on the bench, and Hank climbed up beside him like they'd done it 1,000 times. "He remembers," Tommy said, staring ahead. "I don't know how, but he remembers." I didn't argue. I didn't try to explain it away. Some things don't need proof. They just need space to exist. Later that afternoon, Tommy and his dad sat with me and Debbie in the small office. We brought out adoption forms, just in case. Tommy looked from me to his dad. "I want to bring him home, if he wants to come." His dad hesitated, scratching the back of his neck. "Tom, you know I loved Buddy too. But are you sure this isn't just, I don't know, wishful thinking?" "Dad, he walked right next to me, sat with me like he used to. He knew the park. He looked at that photo for hours. How could a random dog do all that?" His father sighed. "All right, let's at least talk about it." That night, I cleaned up the kennels slower than usual. The photo was still taped to the wall of kennel number 12, but it felt different now. Less mysterious. More like a key that had finally fit into a lock. The next morning, I found a message from Tommy waiting at the shelter's front desk. He'd written it by hand. "Rick, thank you for everything. I talked to my mom and dad last night and we all agreed. We want to foster Hank, Buddy, for a trial period, just to see if he settles. Please let Debbie know. Thank you again. You gave me back something I thought was gone forever. Tommy. Debbie approved the foster with minimal fuss. Hank went home with them that afternoon, trotting into the back seat of their pickup like he'd never left. For a few days, the shelter felt quieter. Hank's presence had never been loud, but it had been steady, like a quiet song playing on repeat. I kept going through my routines, feeding, cleaning, chatting with volunteers, but I kept thinking about that look Hank gave Tommy, and about all the dogs we'd housed over the years. How many stories we'd never known. 4 days into Hank's foster, Tommy called. He's eating well, sleeps at the foot of my bed, went straight to the spot where we used to keep his old toy box. He even scratched at the back door the way Buddy used to when he wanted to go out. Sounds like he's home. Yeah, but there's something else. What's that? Tommy hesitated. Every night around 11, he walks into the hallway and just sits there, stares at the front door, doesn't move, doesn't bark, just waits, for hours. I thought about that. Did Buddy ever do that before? Not that I remember, but it's the same time every night, like clockwork. Could be something from wherever he's been these last few years, routine he picked up. Maybe, but I think he's waiting for someone. You think he's expecting someone to come back? Yeah. That stuck with me. The idea that maybe Hank, Buddy, was still tied to something or someone from those years he'd been missing. I started digging again. With Jake's help, I looked through every dog-related missing pet forum, adoption listing, and rehoming notice from the Templeton area in the past 5 years. One thread stood out. A woman named Carol Simmons had posted 4 years ago about a dog she'd taken in after seeing him wandering near the highway. She called him Ranger. No chip, no ID. Described him as gentle, sweet, quiet. Looked just like Hank. She kept him for 6 months until he vanished one night during a storm. I called the number she left on the post. She picked up on the 3rd ring. Hello? Hi, is this Carol Simmons? Yes, who's this? I explained who I was, and told her I might have found the dog she once called Ranger. She gasped. You mean you found him? After all this time? I think so. But there's something strange. He looks identical to a dog that was supposed to have died years before you found him. Well, all I know is he showed up near our farm one summer, skinny as a rail. My husband wanted to call animal control, but I couldn't do it. I kept him. Slept by the fireplace every night like he'd lived there forever. Then one night we had a bad storm. Power went out. Next morning he was gone. Just gone. Did he do anything strange? She laughed softly. He'd stare at our wedding photo, the one on the mantel, every night before bed. Why that photo? I don't know. Maybe he just liked it. Or maybe he knew something. I asked her to send a photo of Ranger. She emailed one, and my breath caught. It was Hank. No question. Same expression, same scar on the ear. I shared the update with Tommy the next day. So he lived with someone else for a while, Tommy said, running a hand through Hank's fur as the dog dozed at his feet. Yeah, and left during a storm. Like he was trying to get back. Maybe he's been looking for you this whole time. Tommy didn't say anything, but I saw the tears in his eyes. Over the next few weeks, Hank settled in, slept through the nights, stopped sitting by the door. He played in the yard, barked at squirrels, and even started chasing after the ball again. His tail wagged more. He ate better. When I visited, he greeted me with joy, but I knew he had his person again. But the story wasn't done yet. One Sunday afternoon, I got a call from a woman named Ellie Harper, who worked at a small rescue near the state border. She'd seen the photo I posted on the shelter's bulletin board about Hank's story. "I saw your flyer, the one with the boy and the dog. I swear I've seen that dog, or one just like him. But it was years ago, with an older man who lived out by Miller's Creek." "What can you tell me?" "Man's name was Walter, lived alone. The dog never left his side. Everyone called him Duke." "That sounds familiar." "Walter passed away 2 years ago. The dog vanished not long after. We figured he ran off in grief. Never found him." "Do you have a photo of Walter with the dog?" "I do. Hold on." She texted it to me a few minutes later, and there he was again. Hank, or Duke, or Buddy. Same scar, same face, same dog. I printed the photo and brought it to Tommy. "He's had other homes," I said, handing it to him. "Other people who loved him." Tommy studied the picture, then looked down at Hank, who looked back with calm, quiet eyes. "Maybe he wasn't just mine," Tommy said. "Maybe he belonged to all of us." I nodded. "Or maybe he chose all of you, one at a time." We sat on the porch together, letting the spring breeze roll by. Hank stretched out between us, his chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. And I realized something then. This wasn't just a dog story. It was a story about how hearts connect. About how a single soul, shaggy, four-legged, and quiet, could find his way back to the people who needed him most, again and again. And he wasn't done yet. 2 weeks after Ellie Harper sent me that photo, something new turned up. It came in the form of a manila envelope with no return address, dropped at the front desk of the shelter sometime between closing Friday night and opening Saturday morning. Inside were 2 photos and a folded piece of paper with a note scribbled in blocky, uneven handwriting. "Saw your story. Thought you should have these. He saved my life. Thank you." There was no name, just that message and the pictures. One photo was of a small log cabin surrounded by trees, a thin stream of smoke rising from its chimney. Sitting on the steps was a man who looked to be in his 60s, wearing thick glasses and a denim jacket. And sitting beside him, as clear as day, was Hank. Or Buddy. Or Duke. I was starting to lose track of all the names, but never the face. There he was again. Same fur, same build, same eyes, staring straight into the lens like he knew the photo mattered. The second picture was different. It was a Polaroid, slightly faded, of the same man sitting inside what looked like a modest living room, this time with Hank lying beside a lit fireplace. In this photo, the man held a piece of paper in his hands. A letter, maybe. And though the photo was grainy, you could tell he'd been crying. There was something in the angle of his shoulders, the way his mouth was clenched. I showed the envelope and the contents to Debbie, who shrugged. "It's getting spooky now. What's next? A letter from the president?" "I'm telling you," I said. "This dog's lived a dozen lives. Maybe more." "Then why come back now? Why return to Tommy?" I thought about that. Maybe he wasn't done with him yet. Or maybe Tommy's the one who needs him most this time. A few days later, Tommy showed up at the shelter, Hank riding shotgun in the pickup like he owned it. Tommy walked in, holding a thumb drive. "I made you something," he said. "I went through old home videos after you showed me the photo from that rescue lady. There's some stuff in there I think you should see." We loaded the video on the office computer. The footage was grainy, taken with one of those handheld camcorders from the early 2000s. The first clip showed a much younger Tommy, maybe 6 or 7, chasing a ball across the backyard while Buddy, unmistakably Hank, bounded after him. His bark was sharper then, his movements quicker. But it was the same dog. In the background, Tommy's mother called out something about coming inside for dinner, and Buddy paused, tongue hanging out, tail wagging like mad. The next clip was darker, quieter. The camera sat on a table, aimed at the front door. Rain poured outside. Tommy, now maybe 10, stood in a poncho, hugging Buddy tightly around the neck. "It's just for the weekend," he whispered into the dog's ear. "I'll be back Monday. You're gonna stay with Grandma. Be a good boy." The video ended there. Tommy looked over at me. That weekend was when the storm hit. We lost power. Grandma panicked and let him out without realizing the gate was open. We spent days looking. I thought he was gone. Then he showed up again, muddy and tired but fine. That was a year before he saved me in the woods. You think he's done this before? Disappeared and come back? Maybe. Or maybe he always found his way to where he was needed. Tommy clicked ahead on the footage. A final clip showed Buddy lying under the Christmas tree, his nose sniffing the air, clearly resisting the urge to tear into a package wrapped in bone-patterned paper. We used to joke he had radar for treats, could find a cookie buried under 3 layers of wrapping and duct tape. Maybe it wasn't radar, I said. Maybe it was something else. The next few days were quiet. Shelter life went on. Dogs came in. Dogs got adopted. Some got sick. Some got better. But something about the air felt changed. Like Hank's story had sent ripples through the walls. People came in asking for updates. One woman donated a box of treats, saying she'd read about him online. Another offered to sponsor adoption fees for older dogs in honor of the miracle mutt, she said. Then came the message from a local therapist named Carol Henley. She left it on the shelter voicemail early one morning. "I heard the story about the dog that keeps finding his way back. I know it sounds odd, but I think I know him too. If he's the same dog, he came into my life after my husband passed. Stayed with me for a few months, then one day just walked out the door like he had someplace to be. I still think about him. I called him Murphy. I'd love to meet him again, even if just to say thank you." I played the voicemail for Debbie. "You're collecting witnesses now," she said. "This is officially the weirdest thing I've seen in 20 years of rescue." "What if it's not weird?" I said. "What if it's just rare? Rare like a dog with a passport, or rare like an angel? Somewhere in between." We arranged for Carol to meet Hank at Tommy's house that weekend. She arrived with a homemade pie and a framed photo of herself sitting on a porch swing, Hank curled at her feet. "It was from 5 years earlier," she said. She still remembered the day he showed up, limping slightly, but friendly. Her husband had passed 3 months prior. She'd been spending her days in silence until one morning she found him on her porch, curled up like he belonged there. He never barked, never begged, just sat by my side, every morning, every evening. I swear he'd lean on me whenever I cried. And then one day, he was gone, like a ghost. But I've never stopped thinking about him. She knelt down in Tommy's living room. Hank approached her slowly, sniffed her hand, then rested his chin on her knee. She ran her fingers through his fur, tears rolling silently down her cheeks. "It's him," she whispered. "He came back." Tommy stood nearby, watching, saying nothing. "Do you want to take him back?" he asked softly. Carol smiled through her tears. "No, sweetheart. He's where he needs to be. I just wanted to say goodbye properly this time." After she left, Tommy looked down at Hank, who'd returned to his spot beside the couch. "He's been more people's dog than just mine." "He's everyone's," I said. "But for now, he's yours." That night, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at a map. I'd started marking all the locations where Hank had reportedly been seen or lived. From Templeton to Miller's Creek, then out toward Franklin Pines, and now here. The pattern wasn't linear, but there was something about the way it curved, like a loop, like he was making rounds. Jake called later, and I told him about the envelope, the photos, and Carol's visit. "You're making a legend out of this dog," he said. "I'm not doing anything. He is." You ever consider he's more than just a good dog? I think about that every day. What are you going to do with all this? I don't know. Write it down. Tell people. Make sure he's remembered. He's already unforgettable, Rick. Trust me. A few nights later, a storm rolled in. Heavy rain, wind, the kind that rattles windows and sends dogs under beds. I was half asleep when my phone buzzed. Tommy. "Hank's gone." I sat up straight. "What?" "The back door was open. I swear I locked it. The wind must have pushed it. I've been calling and calling. Nothing." "Stay there. I'm coming." I grabbed a raincoat, keys, and flashlight. Drove through sheets of rain, the roads slick and shiny. Tommy stood in the driveway, soaked, calling Hank's name over and over. No answer. We searched for hours, through woods, along ditches, into neighbors' yards. Nothing. Not a paw print, not a sound. By sunrise, we were exhausted. Tommy sat on the tailgate of his truck, soaked to the bone. Why would he leave again? After all this? I don't know. Maybe he had someplace to go. But he was home. I put a hand on his shoulder. Sometimes home is wherever he's needed most. We filed a report, posted on every site and community board, printed flyers. Days passed. No sign. Then, on the 6th day, the shelter phone rang. "I think I found your miracle dog," said a man from Ridgeview, a town 3 hours south. "Showed up on our porch last night. My daughter saw a flyer." We drove down that afternoon, and there he was, sitting calmly on the porch, tail thumping, like he'd just gone out for groceries. The man who found him was a veteran, said he'd been going through a rough patch. Spotted Hank just when he was about to do something drastic. The dog walked up to him, put his head on his knee, and stayed there until morning. "He saved me," the man said. "I don't know how, but he knew." Tommy knelt down, hugging Hank tightly. "You can't keep disappearing like that," he whispered. "I need you." And Hank, like he understood every word, gave a soft huff and licked his cheek. I knew then. Hank wasn't just a pet. He was a compass, a guardian, a traveler with a mission we didn't fully understand. Not yet. And wherever he went next, one thing was certain. His story wasn't over. Hank stayed close for the next few weeks, never straying far from Tommy's side. It was like he knew how much his sudden disappearance had shaken the boy, now nearly a man. Tommy didn't talk about it much, but there was a noticeable change in him after that night, like he'd been forced to stare down a kind of fear most people don't think they'll have to face again after childhood. The fear of losing someone you love without knowing why. And even though Hank was back, something quiet had settled into the spaces between them. I visited every few days, bringing treats or extra blankets or just an excuse to see them. On one visit, Tommy was out back repairing the old fence, while Hank lay on the porch, watching every move with those steady, half-closed eyes. "He still waiting for something?" I asked, sitting beside the dog and scratching under his chin. Tommy glanced up from where he was hammering. "Feels more like he's watching now, like he's on guard duty. Maybe he's making sure you're okay. Or maybe he's waiting for me to tell him it's okay to go again," I didn't say anything to that. Just sat there and let Hank rest his head on my boot, tail flicking gently at the sound of Tommy's voice. Later that afternoon, we all went for a walk through the wooded trail behind the house. It was early spring, and the trees were just starting to bud. Birds chirped high above, and the air smelled of damp earth and pine. Hank moved with quiet purpose, ears perked, occasionally stopping to sniff the air or glance back to make sure we were still following. "He always takes the lead now," Tommy said. "Like he knows where we're going before we do. He's got a mission, even if we don't know what it is. I think he's searching again." "For who?" Tommy shrugged. "I wish I knew." A few days later, another message arrived at the shelter. This time, it was a phone call from a woman named Annie Reed, who ran a hospice home up near Coldwater. She said she'd been shown an article in the local paper about Hank, the version Jake wrote for the community news site. And something in her voice told me this wasn't going to be just another lead. "It's probably nothing," she said, "but one of our patients, Mr. Fletcher, has been asking for a dog lately. Says he used to have one that came to him during his worst days. He described the dog down to the last detail. Color, size, even a little scar on the ear. When I saw the picture in the paper, I almost dropped my coffee. It's him. I swear it." "Has he seen the photo yet?" "No. I wasn't sure if it was wise. He's very frail now, but he keeps talking about the dog like it was yesterday. Says he owes that mutt more than anyone will ever know." I passed the message along to Tommy that evening. "What do you think?" I asked. "One more visit?" Tommy hesitated, running a hand down Hank's back. The dog looked up at him, eyes half-lidded, mouth open in a slow pant. "He hasn't left my side since he came back. What if he doesn't want to leave again? What if he needs to?" Tommy looked at me, then back at Hank. "Let's go see the man." Coldwater was a quiet town, nestled between two ridges, the kind of place where everyone knew the names of every dog in the neighborhood. The hospice home was a white brick building with ivy on the walls and wind chimes hanging from the porch eaves. The staff welcomed us kindly, guiding us to a room near the end of the hall. Mr. Fletcher was a thin man with a trimmed white beard, sharp blue eyes, and a voice that still held strength despite the weight of years. When we entered the room, Hank paused at the threshold, his body suddenly alert. His tail didn't wag. He didn't run forward. He just stared. Mr. Fletcher turned slowly in his bed. "Is that him?" Tommy and I glanced at each other. "We think so," I said. "He's been with a few folks over the years." "He's not a dog," Mr. Fletcher said firmly. "He's a guide. And I know how that sounds, but I don't care. The dog found me the night I was going to end it all. Years ago. After my wife passed, and my daughter stopped calling, I sat on my back porch with a bottle and a rifle, and then he just walked up. Sat right on my foot, like he'd known I needed a reason to stay." He reached toward Hank, who now slowly moved forward, step by step, until his head rested gently on the edge of the bed. Mr. Fletcher touched the fur between his ears and closed his eyes. "You saved me once," he whispered. "Don't know if you remember. Doesn't matter. You were the reason I held on long enough to meet my grandson. You're the reason I'm here today." Tommy and I stood quietly. Hank didn't move, didn't blink. He just stayed there, breathing in time with the old man. After that visit, Hank was quieter for a while. Not sad, just still. It was like he'd found a piece of something he'd lost and was trying to understand it. Tommy let him sleep in his room again, and one morning I found them both sprawled across the floor, Hank using Tommy's leg as a pillow. Then came the radio call. Debbie picked it up at the shelter. A park ranger from way out near Glen Hollow said he'd found an old ID collar hanging from a branch deep in the forest. The name tag was scratched and nearly unreadable, but he said the dog in the picture from the article looked just like one he'd seen years ago hiking with an older woman through the woods. She'd called the dog Scout, claimed he always led her home, no matter how deep she wandered. It was getting hard to keep track now. Scout, Murphy, Ranger, Duke, Buddy, Hank. Everywhere he went, he left something behind. A story, a name, a saved life. And maybe that was his purpose. Not to stay, but to arrive. To appear just when he was needed and disappear when the work was done. Tommy seemed to be coming to that realization too. One afternoon, I found him on the porch, flipping through a notebook filled with names and dates. Hank lay beside him, nose tucked under his paw. "I've been writing it all down," Tommy said. "Everyone he's helped. Everything we've learned. Going to publish it? Maybe one day. Right now, it just helps me make sense of it." "And does it make sense?" Tommy looked at Hank. "Not really, but maybe it doesn't need to." That week, Jake stopped by with some updates. He'd been tracking down people who'd commented on the online articles. Dozens claimed they'd known a dog like Hank. Some had photos, others just stories. A woman said he'd appeared beside her car when she'd broken down in a snowstorm and kept her warm until help arrived. A man swore the dog pulled his grandson out of a frozen lake. Each story different, each ending the same. The dog was gone by morning. Tommy read through the accounts in silence. When he finished, he looked down at Hank, who was watching a bird hop along the windowsill. "I think he's been doing this a long time," Tommy said. "Longer than we know." "How long can a dog live?" Jake asked. "Maybe forever," Tommy said, "if he keeps moving." I didn't laugh. None of us did. The following weekend, Hank got restless again. He stood by the door for hours, ears perked, whined softly, panted, paced, sat, and stood again. He was waiting. "It's time again," I said quietly. Tommy nodded. The next morning we opened the door, and Hank stepped out onto the porch. He didn't run. He walked, steady, sure, like he knew exactly where he was headed. We watched him until he disappeared beyond the tree line. Tommy didn't cry. Not this time. He just stood there with his arms folded, lips pressed together. "Where do you think he'll go?" he asked. "Wherever he's needed," I said. "That's what he does." And as the trees swallowed the shape of the dog we knew by many names, I realized something important. We weren't saying goodbye. We were simply letting him keep doing what he'd always done. Showing up, and making things better. The strange thing about Hank leaving that second time was how calm it felt. The first time, when he vanished during the storm, it felt like a loss, like something had been torn away and might never return. But this time, it felt more like a page being turned, like he had somewhere to be, and we were simply a chapter he'd finished. Even Tommy, who had every right to feel abandoned, didn't react with the same panic. He left the door open that night, just in case. The next few days, things went quiet. The shelter was business as usual, but something had shifted. People were still talking about Hank's story. Jake's write-up had made its way across a few local news stations, and then somehow It hit a national site that specialized in feel-good pieces. Suddenly, we were fielding emails from across the country, folks asking if they could adopt Hank or if we had any other magical dogs lying around. Debbie rolled her eyes every time one came in. They think we're some kind of spiritual rescue hotline now. We might be, I said. Don't start. Some of the messages were more personal, though. People writing in to say that just reading about Hank had helped them through a dark moment. Some said it reminded them of their own lost dogs, and others claimed they'd once seen a dog just like Hank, always alone, always watching. A woman from Wisconsin sent a drawing her daughter had made, a crayon picture of a brown dog with a crooked tail and soft eyes, labeled only, "The Helper." I printed it and pinned it to the staff bulletin board. Jake came by again that week with a box full of letters and emails he'd printed out. "We've got something here," he said, spreading them out across the break room table. "Look at the similarities. Look at how many of these people describe the exact same dog. Brown fur, scarred ear, calm eyes. Some even mention the same behavior, showing up in a storm, standing watch, sleeping beside people in crisis. You think it's always been him? If not, he's got a brotherhood out there." I sifted through the pages. Stories from all over. Kansas, Ohio, Maine. One from a man in Arizona who claimed a brown dog pulled him from a flash flood and vanished before the EMTs arrived. Another from a teacher in Idaho who said her students saw a dog waiting outside the school during a lockdown, pacing until it ended. The stories didn't feel made up. They felt lived. "You should map these," I said. "See if there's a pattern." Jake grinned. "Already working on it." Back in Templeton, Tommy had gone back to his routine. School, work, chores. But I could tell he wasn't letting go. Every time I stopped by, he'd mention something Hank had done. Like the dog was still just out for a walk and might return any day. Then came a new development. A voicemail left on the shelter's landline. "This is Darren Kirk. I live near Elk Valley. I think I found your dog. At least the one from the news. He showed up at my brother's cabin 3 nights ago. Just walked out of the woods like he belonged there. I didn't know what to think at first, but then he led me straight to a hiker who'd fallen and busted his leg near the ravine. Guy said he'd been calling for help all night. Your dog stayed with him till I got there. We brought them both down the mountain. The dog wouldn't leave until the medics took the guy away. Then he disappeared. I swear I'm not making this up. Call me." Jake traced the call and cross-referenced it with a local hospital intake report. Sure enough, a man named William Grady had been treated for exposure, dehydration, and a compound fracture. In his intake statement, he mentioned a brown dog with a torn ear who'd stayed by his side all night, licking his face to keep him awake. He thought it might have been a hallucination until others confirmed it. Tommy read the report twice. Then he looked at me. "He's still out there, isn't he?" "Yep, still doing what he does." "I want to see him again. One more time." I nodded. "We'll figure something out." We started posting soft feelers on social media. Not a full-blown campaign, just a quiet note asking folks to report if they saw a dog matching Hank's description. Within a week, we had over 24 replies. Most were vague. A brown dog seen near a bridge. One at the edge of a campground. One man swore a dog had escorted his grandmother back to their porch after she got disoriented on her walk. But one message stood out. A woman named Lorraine Miller said the dog had shown up at her son's rehab center. "He just walked in during group therapy," she wrote. "No barking, no sniffing, just walked up to one of the patients and sat by his feet. The boy started crying. He hadn't spoken in days. He said the dog reminded him of one he lost when he was 10. said he felt safe again. The staff tried to find the dog later, but he was already gone. Left through the fire exit. Jake and I drove out to the center, a low, nondescript building in a quiet part of the county. The director confirmed the story and even showed us security footage. Sure enough, there was Hank. Walking calmly through the lobby, pausing only once to glance at the receptionist before heading toward the group room. "We thought he was a therapy dog from one of the volunteers," the director said, until we realized none of our regular handlers had scheduled that day. "And no one saw where he came from?" "No, just appeared and left the same way." We left copies of the flyer and thanked them for their time. As we got back in the truck, Jake said, "We're chasing a ghost. A ghost with paw prints." Tommy kept his distance for a while. I think it was hard for him to keep hearing about all the people Hank had helped. Each story confirmed something magical, but also reminded him that the dog might never really stay in one place again, and that maybe he never had. But then came a call that changed everything. It was from a retired police officer named Sam Heller. He said he'd once met a dog like Hank during a missing persons case up in Silver Ridge. A 6-year-old had wandered away from a campsite, and the whole town had turned out to search. After 2 days, morale was shot. Then, a brown dog no one recognized showed up at the search party's edge. "He ran into the woods and kept looking back like he wanted someone to follow," Sam said. "So I did. I followed him almost 3 miles into the thickest brush I'd ever seen. And there she was. Cold, scared, but alive. The dog stood between her and me like he was making sure I was safe to approach." "Did he stick around afterward?" "Nope. Once the girl was in my arms, he took off. Never saw him again. But I never forgot him either. I always hoped I'd get the chance to say thank you." We arranged a community gathering that weekend. Jake helped set it up, a sort of informal open mic in the park, just a place for folks to come and share their stories. We didn't promise Hank would appear. In fact, we made it clear this wasn't a search party or a fundraiser, just an acknowledgement, a moment to honor a dog who'd quietly left his mark. More than 50 people showed up. They brought photos, sketches, newspaper clippings. Some cried as they spoke. Others laughed, remembering small things. A dog who knew how to open screen doors. One who would sit perfectly still until you made eye contact, then roll over like it was a private joke. All of them different. All the same dog. Tommy stood near the back, hands in his pockets. He didn't speak, but I saw him listening, absorbing every word. At the end of the event, an older man walked up to me. He didn't say anything at first, just handed me a folded envelope and nodded. Inside was a photo. Hank again, lying beside a hospital bed. In the bed was a young soldier, eyes closed, bandages across his chest. The back of the photo had a note. "My brother, he made it. The dog was there every night. Thank you." The stories weren't just about rescue. They were about presence. About a dog who showed up exactly when people needed him most. Not with noise or tricks or fanfare, but with quiet certainty. A reminder that even in the darkest moments, you might still be worth saving. That night, Tommy came to my house. "I want to write it all down," he said. "Not just the stories. The message. What he means. What he teaches." "You should. But I also want to see him again. Just once more." I looked at him for a long moment. "He'll come. When it's time." Tommy nodded, but his jaw was tight. The not knowing was eating at him, even if he tried to act like it wasn't. We didn't know it yet, but Hank wasn't done. Not by a long shot, because a few days later, a family from the next county sent in a video. It showed their son, who had selective mutism, sitting cross-legged in the yard. And there was Hank, just lying beside him, listening. The boy was speaking. slowly, clearly, words tumbling out like they'd been locked away. The parents filmed from the kitchen window, not wanting to interrupt. And in that moment, Tommy understood something. Hank didn't belong to one person. He belonged to everyone. Even still, he couldn't help but ask the question we were all thinking. Why us? Why was I the one he kept coming back to? I didn't have the answer, but I believed we'd find it, eventually. In the days following that remarkable video, more messages and letters poured into the shelter, creating a steady stream of stories, each unique yet interconnected by the quiet presence of the same brown dog. Tommy would come by every afternoon after school to help me sort through them. We'd sit in the cramped office, surrounded by stacks of envelopes, pictures, and printed emails, each containing a memory, a moment of hope, a small miracle. One story stood out early on, a handwritten letter from a woman named Eleanor Rains. She described a night when her husband had passed away suddenly, leaving her feeling entirely alone and lost. Eleanor had walked out into the snowy evening, numb and directionless, until she couldn't feel her fingers or toes. Just as she'd begun to consider lying down in the snow and never getting up. A dog had appeared from nowhere, guiding her back to her doorstep. She ended the letter with, "That dog brought me home when I had no home left in my heart." Tommy read it silently, folding the letter back into its envelope with careful hands. "He's doing so much good," Tommy said softly, eyes fixed on the window. "He always has," I said. "But it seems like now we're finally able to piece it all together." Tommy sighed, his fingers drumming restlessly against the table. "I just wish I understood why. Why him? Why does he keep choosing people he's never met?" "Maybe he sees something we don't," I said gently. "Maybe he feels something we can't." Tommy nodded slowly. "I wish he could tell us." As if in response, Debbie knocked on the open door, holding another envelope. "You two might want to see this one." It was postmarked from Glen Hollow, a place we'd heard mentioned more than once. Inside was a photograph and a short note. The image showed a young woman in a wheelchair, smiling broadly, her hand resting gently on Hank's back. The note read, "This dog stayed by my daughter's side the night of her accident. She swears he talked to her, said everything would be okay. He didn't leave until she was safely in the ambulance. Thank you." Tommy looked up at me, eyebrows raised. "She said he talked to her." "Maybe not with words," I replied, unsure myself. "But I think she understood him anyway." Jake arrived at the shelter the next afternoon, bringing with him a detailed map marked with pins and dates. Together, we laid it across the break room table, studying the lines and clusters. "Look at this," Jake said, tracing his finger along a series of connected dots. "He's moving in a loop, not random. He's revisiting places." "He's checking on them," Tommy whispered. "He goes back to make sure they're okay." "That makes sense," Jake nodded. "See here? This place, Elk Valley. He's been spotted there 3 times. Glen Hollow, too. He's repeating certain visits." "Like he's taking care of them," I added quietly. The phone rang, and Debbie picked up, waving frantically at us to come over. "It's someone from out near Pine Creek. They've got Hank with them right now." Tommy and I exchanged quick looks and dashed to the phone. "Yes, hello?" Tommy answered breathlessly. "This is Sarah Donovan," a gentle voice replied. "Your dog appeared at our school during recess today. He's sitting with a boy named Liam, who lost his parents recently. The boy won't leave his side, and frankly, neither will the dog. Can someone come out here?" "We'll be there," Tommy assured her. The drive to Pine Creek Elementary was a tense 45 minutes. We arrived to find a group of teachers and students gathered quietly near a playground bench, where a small boy sat huddled next to Hank, one small hand buried in the dog's fur. "He just showed up," Sarah whispered as we approached. "Liam hasn't spoken in weeks. Now he won't stop talking to your dog." Tommy knelt slowly beside Liam. Hank looked up, calm and steady. "Hey," Tommy said softly. "This is Hank. He's a friend of mine." Liam looked up, eyes wide and wary. "He said he knows you." Tommy smiled gently. "Did he say anything else?" "He said he had to leave again soon, but that I wouldn't be alone." Tommy swallowed hard, placing a comforting hand on Liam's shoulder. "He means it. You're not alone." We stayed until evening, quietly watching Hank comfort Liam. When darkness began to fall, Hank rose calmly, nudging Liam's cheek gently before walking slowly toward the edge of the school grounds. Liam stood silently, tears on his face, but smiling bravely. "He said he has to go help someone else now," Liam whispered. "But he'll come back someday." Tommy watched Hank disappear into the trees. "He will," he promised. The stories kept coming, each one deepening our understanding of Hank's extraordinary path. Jake meticulously recorded each event, creating a network of encounters that stretched further than any of us had imagined. One evening, as Tommy and I sat by the fire at my place, Jake burst in, excitement blazing in his eyes. "I found something huge." "What is it?" Tommy asked eagerly. Jake laid out a yellowed newspaper clipping from nearly 30 years earlier. The headline read, "Miracle Dog Saves Family from Fire." The grainy photo beneath showed firefighters standing beside a charred house, and sitting patiently at their feet was unmistakably Hank. "This was decades ago," Tommy whispered. "How?" "Either Hank has been helping people for a very long time," Jake said solemnly, "or there's more than one." "No," Tommy said firmly. "It's him. It has to be." The mystery only deepened when Jake showed us more documents, old records of heroic dogs, scattered across time, all bearing the same description: quiet, scarred ear, gentle demeanor. "Could it really be him?" Tommy asked. Jake shook his head in wonder. "I think he's been at this far longer than we imagined." The realization stunned us into silence. Hank's presence wasn't a recent phenomenon. He'd been a guardian for generations. "Why us, though?" Tommy finally whispered. "Why now?" "Maybe it's time people remembered," Jake said softly. "Maybe he's ready for people to see what's possible." That weekend, the community held another informal gathering in the park. Even more people came forward, sharing stories new and old, piecing together the mosaic of Hank's journey. Tommy listened closely, holding tightly to each detail, determined to understand the why. Afterward, a small elderly woman approached him, touching his arm gently. "Your dog saved my father's life during the war," she said, handing him a faded photograph of a soldier and a familiar dog. "He said the dog just appeared one night, guided him safely through enemy lines, then disappeared again. My father always believed that dog was an angel." Tommy stared at the image, speechless. When he looked up, his eyes were damp. "Maybe he is," Tommy whispered. "Maybe that's exactly what he is." Days turned into weeks, and Hank's stories continued to echo across our community, each encounter solidifying something profound. We'd stopped trying to explain it logically, surrendering instead to the truth we all felt deeply. Hank was special. He wasn't done. And somehow, he'd chosen to trust us with the secret of his purpose. Late one night, My phone rang sharply, breaking the silence. "Rick!" came Tommy's urgent voice. "He's here! Hank's outside my door! He's back!" I grabbed my keys and raced to Tommy's house, knowing instinctively that Hank's return meant something significant was about to unfold. Another chapter waiting patiently to be understood. When I arrived at Tommy's house, Hank was calmly sitting on the porch steps, tail wagging gently, as though he'd never left. Tommy stood in the doorway, his face a mixture of relief, curiosity, and caution. It was clear Hank's unexpected return had shaken him, reigniting 1,000 questions he'd pushed aside. "He was just sitting there," Tommy said quietly, his voice thick with emotion, like he knew I'd open the door exactly when I did. I moved closer, kneeling beside Hank and scratching him behind the ears. He nuzzled my hand gently, eyes peaceful but alert. "You're back," I whispered, almost to myself. Tommy knelt next to us, placing a hand on Hank's side. "He doesn't seem tired or worn out at all. It's like he's never been gone." We sat in silence for several minutes, just absorbing the quiet joy of Hank's presence. Eventually, Tommy spoke again, his voice low but clear. "Why now, Hank? What brought you back this time?" Hank merely rested his head gently against Tommy's leg, content to be close again. The following morning, Jake arrived at the house early, camera and notebook in hand. He was buzzing with questions, eager to document Hank's return. "Did he give any clues? Any idea why he came back?" Jake asked, eyeing Hank as though expecting an answer. "Nothing yet," Tommy said, shaking his head slowly. "But I don't think it's random. There's something else he's here to show us." Jake nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe he's closing a loop. Maybe he's finally bringing all these stories together." Hank seemed unfazed by the attention. He wandered the yard calmly, sniffing gently at the grass, pausing occasionally to look toward the woods, as if expecting someone or something to appear. Over the next few days, the local interest in Hank's return exploded. Calls flooded the shelter. People asked to visit, wanting just a glimpse of the famous dog. But Hank appeared uninterested in fame. He remained quiet, reserved, close by Tommy's side, seemingly waiting. Then, on a cool Saturday afternoon, a battered old truck pulled up to the shelter. An elderly man stepped out, leaning heavily on a cane, and made his way slowly to the entrance. Debbie met him at the door, guiding him gently inside. "I heard you found him," the man said quietly. "I heard he came back." Tommy and I exchanged glances before moving forward. "I'm Tommy," Tommy said, offering a hand. "You're here about Hank?" "Name's Benjamin Tate," the man replied, shaking Tommy's hand firmly despite his frailty. "This dog was with me once, years ago. Saved my life." "Please," I gestured toward a chair. "Sit down. Tell us what happened." Benjamin eased into the chair, eyes distant but clear with memory. "About 20 years ago, I was in an accident out near Ridgewater Gorge. My truck went off the road, and I was pinned inside for hours. I'd given up hope, couldn't move, couldn't yell. Then out of nowhere, a dog appeared. This dog. He stayed with me through the night, kept me warm, kept me awake. By morning he was gone, but he led rescuers straight to me." Tommy listened intently. "Did you ever see him again after that night?" Benjamin shook his head slowly. "Never. But I never stopped wondering who or what he was. Seeing him again now, even after all this time, well, it feels like coming home." We brought Hank into the office, where he approached Benjamin gently, sniffing him once, then laying his head carefully on the man's knee. Tears welled in Benjamin's eyes. "Thank you," Benjamin whispered, voice trembling. I never got to say it before, but thank you. After Benjamin left, Jake stood quietly by the window, watching Hank thoughtfully. "He's revisiting people," Jake said softly. "Closing chapters, giving closure." Tommy nodded, gazing at Hank as he dozed peacefully by the door. "Or maybe he's preparing for something bigger." The next few days were filled with quiet anticipation. We began to sense that something significant was coming, though none of us knew exactly what. Hank stayed close, seemingly anchored to Tommy, patient and watchful. Late one afternoon, as we were finishing up paperwork, the phone rang again. Debbie picked it up, listened carefully, then waved urgently. "It's a call from a woman named Alice Holcomb. Says Hank stayed with her son during a dangerous storm 3 years ago. She needs to see him urgently." We arranged for Alice to visit immediately. She arrived within the hour, eyes wide with hope and urgency. "My son, Alex," Alice began, clutching a photograph. "Hank found him during a tornado. Alex was trapped under debris. Hank stayed by his side until rescuers came. My son has been unwell recently, struggling again. He hasn't spoken in days, won't leave his room. I thought, maybe Hank could help him once more." Tommy immediately nodded, understanding instinctively. "We'll take Hank to see him." At Alice's home, Alex lay silently on his bed, eyes distant, unresponsive. Hank entered the room slowly, gently jumping onto the bed and lying quietly next to Alex. Minutes passed, heavy with expectation. Then, slowly, Alex's hand reached out, finding Hank's fur, gripping tightly as though afraid the dog might vanish. "Hank," Alex whispered hoarsely, his voice thin and strained. "You came back." Hank nudged him softly, pressing closer, steady and calm. Over the next hour, Alex spoke in whispers, sharing his fears and pains, the dog listening without judgment, offering comfort in his quiet way. Alice watched from the doorway, tears streaming down her face, holding Tommy's hand tightly. "He's healing him," she whispered softly. "He's doing it again." As we drove back that night, Tommy was quiet, thoughtful. "He's making rounds," Tommy said eventually. "Making sure everyone's okay." "Do you think he'll stay this time?" I asked gently. "No," Tommy said with quiet certainty. "He's not done yet." In the days following, Hank's mission became clearer. He was revisiting lives he'd touched, gently healing old wounds, leaving peace behind. Each reunion felt significant, purposeful, reinforcing something we had all begun to believe. Hank wasn't merely a dog. He was a presence, guiding people toward hope and recovery. But even amidst these powerful reunions, Tommy began to wonder aloud more frequently about the dog's future, his own place in Hank's incredible story. "I know he's going to leave again," Tommy admitted quietly one evening. "I'm ready for it, but it still hurts every time." "Maybe this time he'll show us why," I suggested softly. "I hope so," Tommy said earnestly, eyes glistening with determination. "Because whatever he's doing, wherever he goes next, I want to be part of it." We knew Hank's journey was far from complete, his path winding through countless lives still waiting to be touched. Each moment spent in his presence deepened our awareness of the gentle magic he carried within him. It was as if Hank was preparing us, strengthening us for what lay ahead, guiding Tommy toward a truth we had yet to fully grasp. But whatever awaited us, whatever revelation was still hidden in the days to come, one thing was certain. Hank was patiently leading us forward, step by gentle step, toward understanding. The morning Hank disappeared for the final time, there was no storm, no warning, no sound. The air was calm, the sky streaked with soft peach light, and everything about the world felt like it was pausing to breathe. Tommy woke early, not because of an alarm, but because he somehow sensed it. He walked down the hall, half expecting to see Hank waiting on the porch or curled by the fireplace, but the house was still. Hank was gone. This time there were no open doors or broken latches. No sign of him slipping away. It was as if he had simply stepped out of existence, leaving behind only the warmth of his presence still lingering in every room. Tommy sat at the kitchen table, staring out the window. I joined him not long after. I hadn't even asked why he called. I just knew. "He didn't even say goodbye," Tommy said, voice steady but low. "He never does." Tommy shook his head, more in awe than sadness. "I thought maybe this time, with everything that's happened. I don't know. I thought maybe he'd stay." I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a crumpled envelope. "This came in yesterday at the shelter. No return address, just this inside." I passed him the photograph. It was a shot of Hank, taken from behind as he walked down a dirt path between two fields. Ahead of him, the path curved toward the edge of a tree line. The picture wasn't perfect. It was slightly blurry, the light just dim enough to cast him in shadow. But there was something peaceful about it, purposeful. "When did this get sent?" "Postmarked 3 days ago. Someone must have seen him and knew what it meant." Tommy stared at the photo a long time. He didn't speak. I didn't press. Over the next week, the messages kept arriving, like a curtain slowly drawing back on the last act of a story we never fully understood until now. People wrote in from all corners of the country, places Hank had never been mentioned before. A couple in Montana, whose daughter, recovering from a severe accident, said a brown dog sat at the foot of her bed for 3 nights until she could walk again. A farmer in Georgia who found a dog sitting beside his aging mother in the field after she collapsed. A paramedic from Maine who swore a dog matching Hank's exact description had guided him to a child buried beneath snow during a blizzard. The dates overlapped. The places were thousands of miles apart. And still, it made sense. "He's not just one dog," Jake said during our last big gathering at the shelter. "Or maybe he is. Maybe he's something else entirely, a thread between people. A living hope." No one argued. Tommy didn't say much that day, but as people stood and shared their final stories, adding names and memories to the growing wall we'd built in the main hallway, he walked the length of it slowly, hand brushing over the photos and notes taped there. When he reached the end, he took a deep breath and pinned his own final message to the wall. A single sentence, handwritten in the corner of a photograph of Hank lying in front of the fireplace. "Thank you for choosing me." That night, Tommy and I sat under the stars outside the house, the fire pit glowing low between us. We didn't need words. The air carried enough meaning. It was the kind of silence that felt full instead of empty. Eventually, Tommy spoke. "I think I know now why he kept coming back." I turned to him, letting him find the words in his own time. "He was preparing me. All those returns, all those goodbyes. He was teaching me something every time. How to let go, how to hold on, how to be there for someone else, the way he always was for me." I nodded slowly. "He knew you'd be the one to tell his story." "No," Tommy said with a soft smile. "He knew I'd be the one to continue it." And that's exactly what Tommy did. He didn't go back to his old routine. He didn't retreat into himself like I worried he might. Instead, he started volunteering at the shelter full-time, took over handling new arrivals, sat with the scared ones, walked the ones who didn't trust people yet, whispered to the ones who only knew silence. And little by little, he became the presence Hank had been for so many others. A boy came in with his foster parents one day. quiet, unsure. He sat on the floor beside a skittish mixed breed named Clara, who hadn't let anyone touch her since she arrived. Tommy knelt beside them, said nothing, just sat with the boy, offering quiet support. By the time the visit ended, Clara had her head resting on the boy's lap. A month later, they sent a picture. Clara curled up in bed beside the boy, both sound asleep. The story continued. Tommy began writing it all down, every story, every sighting, every whispered thank you sent from strangers. Eventually, it became a book. Not one filled with declarations or conclusions, but a simple gathering of moments, encounters that couldn't be explained, only shared. And he called it exactly what it was, Hank. People started visiting just to see the wall of stories, to add their own, to say thank you. Some came because they'd met Hank, others came because they wished they had, and all of them walked away with something: hope, peace, the quiet sense that maybe, just maybe, they'd be okay. Years passed. The shelter grew. We started a small sanctuary for older dogs, ones that didn't find homes quickly. We named it Hank's Field. It sat on a little plot of land behind the main building, filled with grass, shade trees, and benches where visitors could sit and listen to the quiet. Dogs ran freely there. Sometimes they sat still and stared at the trees like they were waiting for someone. One day, an older woman came to visit Hank's Field. She wore a bright scarf and carried a small wooden box. She asked if she could leave it beneath the oak tree. "My husband always said that dog saved his life twice," she told Tommy. "Once when he was young, and again when he was old. I think he'd like to be close to him." We made space for the box beneath the roots. That night, Tommy sat beneath that same tree, now grown wide and sturdy. A breeze rustled the leaves above. He didn't speak. He just waited. And if you asked him what he was waiting for, he wouldn't have said Hank. He'd have said the moment. The feeling, the quiet recognition that you were not alone, that something unseen still moved in the world, with kindness and purpose. That was Hank's gift, not just the rescues or the stories or the impossible journeys, but the reminder that you mattered, that your pain was not invisible, that someone, something would always show up, even if only to sit beside you in the dark. Some nights, when the moon is low and the sky glows silver, Tommy still swears he hears soft footsteps on the gravel path, a light breath against the wind, a gentle presence beside him for just a moment. He doesn't look. He doesn't speak. He just says, "Thank you." And the feeling stays, long after the night fades, long after the dog is gone, because some stories never truly end. They just keep showing up when we need them most.